5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider, Sports Talk 1050, WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side, and it is MGoBlog Roundtable time. The MGoBlog Roundtable crew is with us, and it is always a pleasure to be with the band. We are back together. And so let's just get all the pleasantries out of the way first, starting off with Brian Cook, the man that started it all at MGoBlog BC. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. I'm depressed that there's no more rugby sevens.
Well, did you like the rugby sevens?
Yeah, I like the rugby
I
sevens.
did too. It was fun.
And you probably love the Donovan Edwards-esque run for the win at the end.
Well, she didn't put her finger up. I was like, come on, there's a procedure here, there's a protocol.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Seth Fisher, good morning. How are you?
Man, I pulled a late night last night because, as you all know, this is like the biggest time of the year for me when the rosters come out and we have all the new weights and you got to compare all the weights from last year and before.
Oh.
So
Did the phone books come out?
the phone books came out late
The
last
phone books
night. So I
came
was
out. All right.
I was pounding it, right? I was pounding the phone books last night to make sure that we're going to get that info out there, and there have been some significant changes, but yeah, man, that's a big day.
Yeah, we are going to definitely be going over some of the weights for sure. And one, Mr. Craig Ross, the venerable, as I call him, Craig Ross. He, with his own fan club that he didn't even know about. You didn't even know there was a Craig Ross fan club.
I'm still in denial. You know, the boys are back in town. Alas, I'm Ringo in this grouping, but I guess I'm happy to be Ringo.
Someone's got to keep the rrhythm, Craig.
Someone's got to keep it in. Okay, I'm always here.
I think
please.
Ringo was only like 5 years older than the other Beatles, by the way, not
Only
5,000.
5 years old.
Then you're not Ringo.
Not so subtle shot.
Unlike
Not
being
so subtle
35 or 40 years old. Yeah, okay.
All right,
Thanks.
so let me start off by giving Seth Fisher some credit because Seth, about a year ago, gave a speculative. He was like, this is how it could have gone down. This is what might have happened, and I don't think he knew at the time how on point he was or how. But I think I can't confirm, but I think he absolutely nailed it. Because the story out of Mount Pleasant this week is not directly related to what's going on in Ann Arbor right now, but it's totally relevant. The NCAA investigation into the Connor Stallion stuff up there, absolutely related, right? Now, let's get the because someone asked at the very beginning, the hammer is about to drop on Michigan. What do you guys have to say about that? I bet you guys will go around the table to hear what you guys are hearing about it. Starting with you, Brian. I'll chime in at the end. But are you hearing anything about a hammer being about the drop or
We
notice of
don't have-
allegations this week?
Sam, we don't have sources. You're our source.
So what? So here, listen. What I got was they aren't anticipating anything this week.
Okay.
So does
my
that mean?
My
Go ahead.
best sources are reporting that Michigan is not expecting anything this week.
Right. So if that means to me, if something comes down this week, it would be a surprise.
Okay.
So all these Buckeyes.
According to our insiders, in fact, you might even call him the Michigan insider.
Yeah, all these Buckeyes in my feed. Scam Webb just won't report the facts, won't report the truth. Like, what are you talking about? Just because On3 says it doesn't mean I have to report it. I did check on it because of the prevalence of the rumor, just kind of asking around, noteworthy folks over there, like, hey, you guys expecting something to come down this week? Like, we aren't anticipating anything. I mean, if something comes, we'll react, but it's not like we've been given not a word to say, hey, this is about to come. So no, that is not the expectation. If something comes down, they will respond accordingly. All right. So that's number one. Number two, though, was the story to me, the noteworthy occurrence this week And what I talked about on the board was the dismissal of the quarterback coach at Central Michigan, basically a week before the season, like a day before fall camp starts. So Jake Costin, the quarterback coach, got let go. Questions about it to McElwain, to the AD. The response was, hey, we don't comment on an ongoing investigation. And I said, hey, Ira, if it had nothing to do with the investigation of Costin's dismissal, now stay with me, Brian, and you've been covering sports for a long time. If it had nothing to do with it, wouldn't they just say, hey, the dismissal of Jake Costner has nothing to do with the ongoing investigation? Wouldn't they just have said that? That's not what they said. They just said, we don't comment on ongoing investigations. Very suggestive to me.
I mean, fundamentally, I don't necessarily think this has anything to do with Michigan. It's just Stallions was bros with this guy, and he's like, hey, can you help me beat Michigan State? And he's like, all right, we'll try. And then they couldn't even do it. That was not a good Michigan State team. They like,
but it does, because the initial premise was that he was in East Lansing that day, stealing signs.
oh yeah,
For Michigan. That was the initial. That was what.
Wait. They think that Connor Stallions was there because we needed signs to beat Michigan State.
well, yeah, that's the whole reason they beat Michigan State. Like,
Wait, wasn't it 49-0 and didn't
I
Michigan-
know. And remember, there was that Bruce Feldman article that said that the sign stealing was worth 21 points a game. So by Spartan math, that's 50 points.
So
They're like,
do you remember how that game ended? It like the last 5 plays where Alex Orji is running there. Try to stop it.
well, I mean, and they remember they were going to the sideline to get their plays in for a quarter, and they weren't doing anything then either. And then they were like, forget it. Like, we're just gonna do the normal stuff because it doesn't matter.
And
Right.
hadn't the Big Ten warned
Oh my God.
Michigan State in advance, so they knew about it?
Well, yeah,
The allegations were known by that point, regardless of the implications. Beyond that, go ahead.
No, the point is that there's no way Connor Stallions could have been on that sideline without someone at CMU helping. And I still wonder how far it goes, because McElwain probably recognized him on the sideline and is like, how do you spend the whole day on the sideline and like see him in your coach's clothes and be like, all right, who put this guy here, right? Like that had to have been something, unless he knew what was going on too, which makes sense. They probably stole Michigan sign guy for a week to try to beat Michigan State. But it shows you how little it matters, because that was not a good Michigan State team.
no.
And CMU did not do any better than the spread, did not do any better than you thought they would. There was no point if you watch that game where you're like, man, CMU really knows what's coming.
Oh yeah, and that was really disappointing, because it would have been incredibly funny if they had lost to Central Michigan, and then the Connor Stallions like shots of him on the sideline looking all incognito came out. They would have flipped even more than they already flipped. It was just like there are 2 big missed opportunities for Michigan in 2023. One was that, and the other one was Donovan Edwards scoring another 3rd and 11 touchdown in the red zone against Manny Diaz. Those are the only 2 things that went wrong last year.
Right. I mean, these people, they're insane. It doesn't have to make sense to your right. It's like, what they thought Michigan needed to steal signs, to Craig's point, to beat Michigan State. It doesn't have to make sense, Craig. They think that this is the smoking gun, that they dismissed the quarterback coach at Central. That's a sign that the hammer's about to drop against Michigan. No, it actually runs counter your argument, because what it's saying is there was some sort of collusion. There was some sort of effort afoot. And this is what I had been hearing, to get to giving Seth the credit. What I'd heard was that Connor Stallions had been doing some scouting work for Central Michigan for months in preparation for the Michigan game. Like, he had been studying tape and getting ready for that moment for months, and that he had gotten on the sideline, that they had gotten him on the sideline. Because think about it. How do you get on the sideline? That's not an easy thing to do.
No.
Assuming that you can do that, how do you have the exact coaching garb that they're going to have on that day?
Oh yeah.
Damn near impossible, right? How do you know what they're going to wear? So he got on the sideline and he had on everything they had on to a T. And then to take it a step farther, if you were Michigan, because what you got to know about these coaches, they all know the other team's sign stealer guy. They all know. They know who the guy is from the other team. So he's going to be on Michigan State's sideline. You're going to risk it on Michigan State's side. It makes no sense. He's in disguise for a reason because he knows they would know who he is at Michigan State. You're going to risk that? No, there's no way that Jim Harbaugh or anybody affiliated with Michigan would be like, yeah, this makes sense. The juice is worth the squeeze. No freaking way. Makes no sense. This was all about Central Michigan. And not to mention the fact that you would have him in the stands, the vantage point and everything.
Yeah, I mean, you look what he's doing on the sideline. He's talking to the quarterback coach. He's not scouting Michigan State signs. He's watching. I mean, he could have been practicing. It could have been practice, right? It could have been like, okay, you got this opportunity. We're going to be playing them later. You want to get you want to get it down. Here's some live rounds that you could do against, the scout team and see and see what you can do. So there's possibility that someone at Michigan knew what he was doing. Mostly because
wait. No,
there's possibility. There is a possibility.
It's too stupid.
But you have
that's not something that
I'm getting to the Counter Stallions level here, and the Counter Stallions is that crazy that he'd be like, "Guess what I'm doing?"
Between crazy and stupid.
Guess what I'm doing?
Well, I mean, he might have told some of his low-level grunt bros who thought it was cool.
That's what I'm saying.
But
that's what I'm saying. You cannot discount any stupidity level.
I mean, and then there's a documentary coming out with him in it. How stupid is this man?
There is one very weird thing to me. I mean, I assume he was on the CMU sidelines, but when I first heard this, I went to the CMU web page and looked at all their coaches. They got 3 coaches that look exactly alike, and they could be triplets, and they all look like stallions too. It's very bizarre. It's very weird. I don't know.
Jim McElwain, if he was going to take over a back program, what he would do is clone Counter Stallions and just make him every position coach that he has. Just have a gazillion Counter Stallions all over the place. It's something McElwain would do.
But listen, so my point is that this neuters a major part of the allegations against Michigan. A, that they sent him there to steal signs for Michigan, and then it aids their contention that he would do rogue stuff. And to Brian's point, it defies logic that they would send him there to do this. This would fit the description of that rogue-like behavior. So I'm not saying that there was no violation committed, that there would be no punishment for having a guy who has had some scouting activities that might fall outside the lines. But this part of it, this major part of the allegations, would seem to have been neutered by this investigation, or at least what this investigation is revealing, it seems, up in Mount Pleasant. That's how it seems to me. Revelatory. Now we got to wait to see what the details are, but that's how it strikes me. That's most noteworthy.
I mean, it's not. I mean, like you said, the first time, because what happened was a year ago when you were talking about it, I hadn't heard about the Stallions on the sideline thing yet. So you start describing it, and I'm like, that sounds to me like CMU hired the dude, because the only information that I had at that point was everyone has a signs guy. Everyone knows who the signs guys are, and signs don't really matter that much because everyone was doing it. And based off of that, not that knowledge, there's really no other way this could have gone down. Like I don't, unless Jim was asking McElwain to do him a solid so his science guy could get practice, was the only other remotely plausible thing. Even that was silly. So it doesn't surprise me. The only thing that I'm been concerned about this whole way is the look of it. Is that fans don't understand how much a part of a game this always has been. It'd be like if all of a sudden Michigan was paying players, and they're like, "Oh my God, Michigan was paying players," and they had no concept that this happens that was happening all the time. That there were boosters
Well,
who,
I mean,
like,
at this
that kind of
point,
thing is
who's still talking about this? There are exactly two groups of people still talking about this, and they're Ohio State fans and Michigan State fans. Nobody else cares, and those groups are not rational actors when it comes to Michigan. Like there's no point in like having a reasoned discussion about Connor Stallions with the guy who crosses out all but one M in his tweet, right? Like it's just there's no point to being like,
there's other weirdos out there. There's the Tennessee fan who thinks that Michigan fed who beat them last year.
That was I don't think that was a Tennessee fan. The college football nerds Twitter account was like, oh my God, Michigan sign stealing got Hendon Hooker killed, and I'm like, what?
Yeah,
It's like the Pepe Sylvia scene from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. What are we trying to talk to Charlie right now? Let's move on.
Right. The only concern I have is that the NCAA cannot go after teams for paying players anymore, and that was they used to be able to go and find a Missouri or something like that and take a pound of flesh and feel like they were important. And now that they don't have that anymore, and they have Michigan in their crosshairs, and they feel like Michigan has been making fun of them because they're sensitive little dweebs sometimes, and the concern is that they want their pound of flesh, and their whole approach to this so far has followed that line. They went to the Big Ten and said, "Here's what we have. Why don't you guys do something?" That is way beyond the kind of thing that an NCAA investigation ever does. So we're already looking at actors who are not rational, who actually do have an opportunity to do something. Now, the idea of the story coming down now, it could come down any time, but like the idea that it was a bowl ban is absolutely ridiculous. And any major things that they could attach to it, they just don't have the regulatory framework. What they do have is the opportunity to say, look, everyone thinks this is a big story. You guys need to get under the rug. Why don't you throw some of the guys who are gone under the bus so we can all get past it? I think the NCAA wants a pound of flesh so that they can look like they have any relevance in today's college football world, and they're asking Michigan to give them some of that by just guys, come on, be reasonable. That's what I think is happening.
Well, we shall see. Something will come down at some point on this. They, like I said, they aren't anticipating anything this week. If something comes down this week, though, they'll react. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
What they're not doing is going and asking every single school to say, who's your signs guy, and tell us everything. Right? The NCAA is not opening an investigation into something that everybody in football knows is a widespread thing. So it's not like they're really concerned about getting all the signs guys and making things right. If that's what you think was happening here, obviously they're not, because they're not going after Michigan State signs guys. They're not going after Ohio State signs guys. And everyone could tell you exactly who they were and have the emails to show you how they were sharing signs with each other. So if they actually cared about that, that's what they'd be investigating. They don't, because they don't have a rule that they broke when they did that.
Yeah. All right. So you went over the roster. Said fall camp started yesterday. Too soon to start getting into returns from fall camp, right? After 1 day of camp. But we could get to returns from the roster, as we can look at the spring roster and we can look at the fall camp roster. And there have been some significant gains weight-wise. And so I'm curious, Seth Fisher, as I know you study such things.
Yeah.
And Brian and Craig, I'm assuming you've seen the list or at least heard about it. Mm-hmm. Which ones kind of jump out at you the most is, wow, this is impressive, or these are the most significant?
Well, to me, the thing that stuck out the most, and I think there might even be some noise about it, is Eno Etta, who I assumed was an edge guy, and now looks like maybe he's a 3-tech, and he has put on a lot of weight, or he's put on weight. And which would be a big thing for Michigan because I think they do need some help in that spot, and they'll definitely need it next year when presumably their tackles are in the NFL. So that's the one thing that stuck out to me right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, absolutely. I mean, they moved Cam Brandt back to the edge, which he looked pretty good as an edge, as a true freshman. But he was one of the guys that we were hoping they kind of be able to bulk up into that quasi defensive end, because when they go to a 4-3, Chris Jenkins was actually playing 4-3 defensive end last year. And I think that Rashawn Benny has been hurt. So when Michigan has a guy who's hurt, they seem to function like he's not there for a while. And I know players, this bothers players when they do that, but this has been the way that they've operated. Next guy up. And they didn't have a next guy up behind Benny. And I think that Etta is the guy who can fill that role, especially if he's now up to 308. Now, my guess is that they asked him to bulk up and he got there. But he's not the only one. Brooks Barr got up to 319. So there's a guy you haven't really heard of before, but he gained 50 pounds in his high school career. He's gained another 50 pounds in his college career now. So, I mean, I don't know what you got out of that guy, but I mean, he's now in that range. Trey Pierce is up to 315 now, so he could possibly play nose. And then David Palipale came in at 335, which is, I mean, originally I was like, okay, that guy looks like Terrence Taylor when I was scouting him originally. And now, I mean, 335, you're getting into he's not saying he's Kenneth Grant in his athleticism, but we're talking about Kenneth Grant's size or Mozzie Smith's size, which is, there's a plausible nose tackle. So now one of the concerns
wait.
we
There's
had
not a
this season
plausible
was we
nose
don't have-
tackle now. There's not a plausible nose tackle now. Because a guy like Mozzie Smith needed, I think, 2 full years before he was ready to contribute. So, usually
yes
a guy.
and no, because Pierce looked good last year as a freshman.
Well,
or a freshman. Yeah.
I'm just talking about Palipale.
Yeah.
Unless we get the same kind of talk where we had when Kenneth Grant came in, and everybody was like, "I can't believe this guy can do this at this size." I would put him as a developmental guy because 335, it's tough to play at unless you're a super freak. And usually those guys are not ranked where Palipale is, even though I think that he is underrated.
So a couple of things. So Eno, they had mentioned before, going back to the spring, that he was moving inside, and so that continued in that progression, adding more weight, and so we had Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant in studio recently for our Behind the Uniform series that we're going to be running in August. And they both mentioned Eno as a guy that they feel like is ready to take a step, because they feel like physically he's ready for the rigors. Now, they say, warfare is different on the inside. So it's not just a matter of just being bigger. Right? But they feel like he's got the size and the strength part of it. They feel like he's gotten that piece of it to the point where now he can stand in there, or he can anchor in there. And now he has to get used to the responsibility of it in there, the suddenness of it in there. That comes with experience. But they feel like he's going to be a real contributor. After TJ Guy, because I was kind of getting with KG, it's like they were talking about this defense has a real chance. They legit not just boast what we think we can be better this year. And he was ringing off all the starters. I said, well, you look back at last year, part of what made you guys so good was the depth. When you went second string, it was like you weren't falling off a cliff. So tell me about the other guys when you guys go to the bench. And then he mentioned TJ Guy, of course, they all do. And then he started talking about Eno Etta. They're saying, hey, he's up over 3 bills now. Physically, he can handle it. Now he just needs some experience in there. So I was encouraged. I was encouraged to see the size, the game.
I mean, defensive tackle depth has been the concern because Benny was hurt, and you have Grant and Graham, and they can't play every single down. And what made them so strong part of last year, like you said, is they could go to a Cam Good, and Cam Good was not Mason Graham, but Cam Good could play. And that's what you need, some guys in there who could play. And you looked at the roster, and there was just a huge gap down to like Ike Iwunnah and Alessandro Lorenzetti, who lost another 16 pounds this year and probably isn't happening, or Chibi Iwunnah, who's a walk-on who has some potential, but like he probably still needs another year. And you're like, who's coming next? Well, you had Trey Pierce last year as a true freshman. He's up to 315. That's a guy that you're hoping can play tackle for you. And you have an Oeda who was going to be Derek Moore's backup. And when they were talking about him in spring, I think that's the concept they were talking about until the spring game where they just had no defensive tackles and they threw him in there. And he looked too small. So, I mean, if he's 308 now, I'm not expecting him to be a nose tackle. I'm not expecting him to be an every down off tackle. But I think that he could be that. He could play that role that Jenkins played last year, so Benny can be your third tackle.
Yeah. One of the one that jumped out to me the most is Jayshawn Barham. Jayshawn Barham had been in a college strength and conditioning program for a couple of years. And in one spring in Ann Arbor, he packs on 15 pounds. And it's like, man, first, the Michigan difference, that's number one. But then number two, when you hear all these guys come in, because I'll go over the list of guys we had. I gotta forgive me for not remembering off the top of my head, fellas. But we had come in studio here for Behind the Uniform. We had Alex Orji, Tyler Morris, Jaden Mangum, Rod Moore, Will Johnson, Colston Loveland, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Giovanni Ohadi, and Zeke Berry. And I want to say 7 of them at least mention Jayshawn Barham as an absolute freak show. Like, this dude.
I mean, did you see the spring game? Like, he was all over the place in the spring too.
Yeah, they like, this is going to be, when we talk about the defense possibly being better, because I challenged that notion as they said it. Like, the first ones to say it were like Gio and Colston. I was like, okay, fellas, come on, give me a why. You can't just say that. You got to tell me why it'll be better. Because to say that it'll be as good is not a slight. Like, it was a national championship defense last year. So to say we can be just as good, that's aspirational. You're still striving for something. But to say it'd be better, you got to back that up. So Jayshawn Barham is one of the reasons. He can do all the linebacker stuff they think that Junior Colson can do, but they also think he can do stuff at the line of scrimmage as a pass rusher. That's just different. And at 248
Dude, that's
pounds,
just more about wink blitzing, man, and we don't want to hear that.
well, I mean,
I know, but I know what you're talking about. Colson, Junior Colson was a great blitzer, by the way. They didn't really do that with him much because they like to run so many sim pressures. But they would go 5-1 all the time with him at the edge, and Michael Barrett was too. They had. I don't want to undersell last year's linebackers. It's just the way that they used them last year.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to be perceived.
I want to be clear. What they don't have this year on defense that they did last year is Mikey Sainristil and Rod Moore on either side pointing out what the offense was going to do. And that helps. Knowing the signs doesn't help because they're going to change things up the line or whatever anyways.
You're right.
But seeing how the
right.
receiver is setting up and seeing what kind of route that they're going to do and being able to like put everybody in position, that's difficult. And one way you can ameliorate that loss is by blitzing more. So that when you're talking about adding pressure, what you're saying is they are shifting the ways they're going to do things. They're going to trust their cornerbacks in man coverage more. And if there's somewhere they might have gotten better, it might be, Josh Wallace was good, and by the end of the season, he was good. But he was also good in the context of they were protecting him. They made a lot of those checks in order to make sure that Wallace wasn't always caught with like Roma Dunze. Now, when he got caught with Roma Dunze one time, he did fine. But they did protect him a little bit. If they have corners that they don't have protected, and I'm looking at Jair Hill now. If they have Jair Hill on one side and they've got Will Johnson on the other side, and they don't need to give a lot of protection to those guys, they can blitz a lot more than they did last year.
Yeah. So you're right. I asked the question. This is one of the things I put to Rod. So you don't have Mikey and you don't have Rod. Who gives you that diagnosis, that ability to diagnose out there. So I'm with you, Seth. I know what they lost.
Well,
But
I mean,
what do they
Makari
add?
Page has been around forever. Like, and if there's someone who has proven over and over again that he can organize a defense who's still going to be out there, it's Makari Page.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
So, like, I mean, the only problem is, like, he's not always going to be in the place that, like, Rod Moore or Mikey was last year. Because, like, there's that famous play against Washington where, like, they're in a bunch, they move the back in, and Mikey is just like, he's doing all kinds of, like, mime stuff to the rest of the defense, and then they cover everybody out of the bunch, they get off the field, and that's less possible if you're the deep safety, which Makari Page has always been. So that's my concern, is that I thought, you know, the quarterback of the defense is now your nickel or your box safety, and with Moore out presumably and Mikey in the league, that is kind of, you know, a concern.
Yeah, it's I think Makari is going to be able to give them some of that. I think Will's going to be able to give them some of that. Do I think it's going to be on the same level? If I'm being honest, which I am, I don't think that quotient is going to be on the same level. But do they get better in other areas? And I think the Jayshawn Barham factor, if what they are saying is true, and when you pack 15 pounds on what was an impressive specimen at Maryland, and you hear these dudes talk about, man, this dude is not just his speed. They talk about how powerful he is. It's like, okay. So,
Well,
okay,
he
making sense.
He was a top 100 recruit to start with. So this is not a guy who's operating at an athletic deficit. And he walked into the starting lineup on Maryland's defense as a true freshman. So he's got a ton of experience, and, you know, now he's going to be surrounded by people who are also good at football. And sometimes when that happens, you get a transformation from a guy who was already grading out fairly well at Pro Football Focus, but he has big upside. And, you know, like, the best example of that, I think, is Josh Wallace last year. You know, you bring in this guy from UMass, and it's like, well, I don't know. He was at UMass, but you put him in a context where he's surrounded by very good players, and all he has to do is his job, and he was great the whole year. And so I think Barham is in a position where all of a sudden he could be going from trying to put out fires and to just absolutely wrecking people, because how many times is he going to get, like, a block to him with Grant and Mason Graham as his defensive tackles? Not that often. So I think that's possibly some of the context why he looks so impressive, is because with those two DTs, he's going to be a free hitter a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the roster. I'm sorry, Craig, to interrupt you there. We're talking about roster weights here, right? And Barham came in, like Brian said, as a top 250 recruit, as a top 100 recruit, at 230, and then he played in 22 at 230, and then he played in 23 at 233, and now he gains 15 pounds. So, you know, we're trying to, like, read tea leaves when we're looking at rosters, but one of the things we do is look at, like, their progression over the course of their careers. You usually see that 15 pounds at the beginning of their careers at Michigan, but, well, when you get a 5-star at Maryland, you put him on the field and you say, "You go be you." And I think, if you're, to Brian's point, when you get a 5-star who transfers to Michigan, it's not you be you anymore. It's now you be the best you, because we need everything we can get out of you. And that is, if you can see something from a roster shift, that's one thing you might have seen with Barham.
Yeah,
we need to get to a break real quick before we do, because I want to get to some Zeke Berry conversations, since you guys brought him up on the other side. Zeke came in, had some excited about Zeke. I think it's going to be a breakout year for Zeke. As we get to a break, listen, folks. If you are a do-it-yourself, or your one-stop shop is a Chelsea Lumber. They have 3 locations to serve you in Chelsea, Saline, and Bridgewater. Find them online at chelsealumber.com, whether that's your lumber, your roofing, your doors, your windows, your floors, whatever you need, your tools, your work clothes, your boots, everything in between. Our friends at Chelsea Lumber have you covered. What about those bigger renovation projects like your kitchen renovation, your bathroom renovation? They have you covered there too. Great kitchen and bathroom design showrooms at their Chelsea location and their Celine location. The one in Chelsea, the Kitchen Design Center, completely renovated from floor to ceiling with all kinds of inspiration for your renovation plans. Chelsea Lumber is the place to go. They are second to none. Chelsea Lumber, where the home begins, with 3 locations to serve you in Chelsea, Celine, and Bridgewater. You can find them online at chelsealumber.com. We got to get to a break. Be back on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket.
And we are clear on the radio.
My only reticence about the defense being as good as last year is that I thought the same thing in 1998. Who did we lose? Well, we lost Charles and Glenn Steele, but outside of them, it was the same defense, maybe even a couple more experience. Well, no, it didn't work out that way. Exactly.
But I don't think anyone had any illusions of that defense being better. I never heard anyone say that.
James Whitley did. I knew some of those guys in college, and James Whitley was like, "We are going to be just as good." But
I heard it. I heard that.
I think it is different this year because
I agree. Okay.
The guys that you've lost from this defense, for the most part, are being replaced with more talented players. So I mean, no offense to a guy like Jalen Harrell or Braden McGregor, but Derek Moore is probably going to Ojabo this year. And what we saw from Josiah Stewart was an arrow straight up, and they won't have the depth that they had last year because they had 9 defensive linemen that they were comfortable playing, and that's not going to happen this year. But they still have a reasonable amount of depth. You have Benny at defensive tackle, who's an established player, and it looks like TJ Guy is going to be a good rotation piece at defensive end. You have Rolder, who will be, I assume, a pretty functional backup if he can remain healthy.
He can stay healthy.
And really, it looks a lot like last year because it's kind of like, all right, well, what are we doing at cornerback 2? And I guess nickel is also kind of a question mark. But Chris Jenkins was a guy who went in the 2nd or 3rd round. I forget exactly which, but Mason Graham is probably going to be the first defensive tackle off the board this year. Kenneth Grant also has a very good chance of being a 1st-round pick. Just in terms of like what the NFL draft is going to look like for Michigan, this defense, you have a first cornerback off the board in Will Johnson, and these guys are going to be better. They're also going to be they're also not like guys going from their 4th year to their 5th year. They're guys going from their 2nd year to their 3rd year, so they still have some runway to improve. I don't know. I don't think it can be better. I mean, there's one defense in this century that graded out better, and I think it was one of those Georgia defenses.
Yeah.
And Michigan
it was the
better.
one. I think it was the one that we faced.
Yeah, that defense.
You saw that. They're the Philadelphia Eagles,
right? Yeah. Michigan. That Michigan last year was better in every single Nick Saban defense this century.
Probably.
So I don't know how they can be better, but I guess I would say I'm not really expecting a big drop off because the talent level is still super high.
Back in 1 minute, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing they did last year is they faced several, especially with Washington and Ohio State, teams that you would consider had that NFL passing attack that teams have been winning national championships with, right? When you talk about the Clemson national championships and even Alabama and everyone pretty much but Georgia, when they won, they had that kind of team. And when they didn't have that kind of team, they had a defense that could face that kind of team. Now, Georgia just did it with ungodly talent. Michigan had an NFL defense because they could make those checks. I don't want to underrate how much they lost with Seymour still and with not having Moore on the field because those guys are the ones who are in the middle of the defense making those checks. But, maybe they blitz more and it works. The other thing is they don't face those teams anymore. Ohio State doesn't look like one of those teams anymore.
Yeah, let me shout
Washington
out.
doesn't look like one of those teams.
I got to shout out Rod real quick because he said, let everybody know that, the first bust against Washington, that was all me. You said when Mikey was yelling, that was all me. He said, the second one wasn't
back on air, guys. Stand by.
Second one wasn't my bust.
I got a basketball hot take, Sam, for the end.
Okay.
If you give me 30 seconds.
I got you.
right at the end of the show.
You can't just do a hot take and then we go off the air though. We got to do it a little.
All right,
Like
we're coming back on radio,
Alright,
guys,
okay.
in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Ira Weintraub on the other side on the ones and twos, and the MGoBlog Roundtable crew, Brian Cook, Seth Fisher, and Craig Ross. And I think, I can't remember which one of you brought up Zeke Berry, but Zeke made a splash in the spring, really impressed Lamar Morgan and Wink Martindale to the point where early in the spring, I remember talking to those guys, and they're like, man, this dude, he might be our best nickel. I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah, just come on, man. This is like 2 weeks into the spring, you know? Like, let's slow down a little bit. Like, no, he might be the best nickel. And so, lo and behold, as you get more safeties in the mix, right? I think they're feeling more comfortable with that idea. And as Zeke played more, it's looking like he'll be that guy. And so fast forward to Big Ten Media Days, Brian, and we're sitting down with Makari Page. And Makari, they asked Makari, they said, who stood out to you in the spring? And maybe the first name he mentioned was Zeke Berry. And he said, yeah, the dude is so smooth. We were out there watching him, and he's Dax-like. I'm thinking, man, he's Dax-like. As I had to go to Rod, I said, Rod, you always keep it real. This whole Dax-like thing, come on, man. He said, no, man. He's Dax-like. Man, not the top end speed, but how smooth he is, how he picks things up, how he reacts, how things he just triggers. Dax-like. Zeke Berry, what are you expecting from him this year?
I mean, I guess I'm expecting Dax Hill. My best source says that he's a lot like Dax Hill.
According to the Michigan Insider, Sam? Can you take "the" and just have that be? Can you copyright that word that you are the Michigan Insider, so that everyone knows? I don't know if that's possible, but yeah, man, like he was a guy we liked a lot as a recruit. And one of the reasons I liked him a lot as a recruit, I know I keep going back to like the Wink is going to blitz thing, but he's a great blitzer. And that's not something that Samerstill was particularly good at. They used Samerstill as a blitzer well, especially against Alabama. But even when he was doing that, he wasn't the main threat just as a physical guy. If you get a block on him, Samerstill was not going to be pushing through people. Zeke Berry does. He's just got that explosion to him, especially when running forward. And I thought it would make him a good safety too. But that was one of the reasons that we were very high on him as a recruit. And I mean, that's one of the things they can do with him. Until I see him making checks like Samerstill, I'm not going to pretend that that's something that's in his repertoire.
I'm not expecting that, and nor am I expecting him to be Dax Hill. But I'm expecting for his production at the position to not be this big question mark. Like I think you lose a Mikey Sainristil, who's an all-time great, and no one's going to be Mikey, but can someone be good would be the question. Like when it was, and I'm certainly not sitting here saying that other guys at the position couldn't be good, but I just didn't hear the same level of optimism coming from within like I hear it now talking about Zeke. Zeke, I do think, brings you the kind of versatility in that physical in the box. He does give you some coverage skill. He's an excellent blitzer, like you say. I think there are going to be some growing pains that come with gaining experience. But he talked about his trajectory, and he said it's all about habits. He said I sort of drew the contrast with Rod. Rod came in and Will came in, and they were like vets. They were in their playbooks. They had habits like vets. Zeke said, I wasn't like that. Just be honest, I wasn't like that. So some guys are like regular freshmen. Takes them a minute to, hey, I'm in the building in my off time. I'm studying my playbook in my off time. Well, he's like that now, and they're saying it's starting to show. So, We
Yeah.
shall see.
I mean, they were
fellas.
originally talking about him as a kind of viper, and there is a little bit of Jabril in his game. A lot of Jabril in his game. I don't want to start making a direct comp to Jabril Peppers, but that's the kind of like explosion that he had. And when you're talking about what the players see in the off season, they're not out there running drills. They're not running plays, right? What they're doing is they're training. So they see how hard a guy works, and they're testing each other in their skills competitions, right? So there's a big board in Michigan's weight room with like a gazillion. I haven't been able to read every single one of them, but there's just every single skill or every single training thing, like all speed, weights, different things that you can do in the weight room everyone's on the board. What's your personal best? And I know Barry is high up on the board for a lot of those things. So when they're competing against each other and they're seeing who can move better, that's one thing that they're going to be able to see in the offseason. And that was something that was all over his recruiting film too. Now, Sam says he's taking it more seriously now. Yay. Because that's what you needed to get to tap that kind of potential. That's the difference between him and a guy like, who was the safety from New Jersey that they had for a while, who had kind of a similar skill set, but just never put it together. But that's the difference. You need to have that buy-in as a vet. And it made sense, when you got Rod Moore and Samer still ahead of you, then how much you're going to get on the field.
Yeah, the other thing, and Craig, I mean, I think Michigan fans overall will be able to appreciate this. Listen, he said, I had serious money on the table to go home. Like, they were like, hey, you can have whatever, basically, you can have whatever you want to come back home. Didn't say which school. And all these guys were very open with, I had serious money. Giovanni Ohadi was like, I had to pray to stay. That's how much money. That's how much money was on the table for me. So before the national championship and the transition NIL wise, where Michigan really got in the game NIL wise, these guys had to take a leap of faith to stay as far as the finances of it were concerned. And Zeke, he told his family, I'm staying. And it wasn't like the family was like, hey, you should stay. They were like, hey, you should really think about this. I mean, you should really.
Where is he going to? He's from the Bay Area, isn't he?
He's from Oakland. He's from Oakland, and so he's like, I'm staying. It's a new staff coming in. It's a chance to earn the spot. Not to say it wasn't before, but it's a definite chance to earn the spot. I'm gonna earn a spot, and it's something about it. That mindset. I also think it plays into a dude like that being successful on the field, Craig.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how he'll do. I mean, I'm hopeful. I saw his tape out of high school. I liked it a lot. But Mikey Sanderstill's an icon, and he's that for a reason. So let's hope that Zeke Berry is really good, and we're saying the same thing about him in a year or two.
Yeah, I don't think let's set the bar reasonably. He's not gonna be Mikey. Okay, let's establish.
Yeah.
Let's establish the unlikelihood. It is very unlikely that that'll happen. Yeah. I don't want to say it's impossible, Zeke. I don't want to put a ceiling, but very unlikely that he goes out there and he's Mikey Sainristil this year. So, but Craig, you had a take that you wanted to get in before the end of the show.
Yeah, I did. I was over at the basketball office and I dropped off a name, an 8th grader, to Kyle Church, who plays for Lefty Drizel's kid in DC. He's going into 9th grade. And while I was there, I was thinking, Michigan keeps talking about their 13th scholarship. Now, I don't know if that's salient anymore because it's just roster limitations, or soon to be just roster limitations and not scholarships. But it struck me who they should offer: Jamal Crawford. And I'm serious about this. And the more I thought about it, the more sensible it became.
God, you got to use the hot take voice for this, Sam. Greg, you gotta...
Yeah, I mean, they need to bring Jamal Crawford back if he plays or doesn't play. Now, here's a kid who was wrongfully thrown out of Michigan by a wretched NCAA, a kid who wanted to be in school, was a good student, a great student, incidentally, and wanted to be here, and they tossed him out. And I won't go through his story again. I did it once a couple of years ago in the summer when I was doing the show by myself for a bit. And there's no reason why. Now, if the University of Michigan wants the courts to say that's okay, I'll file an action free for them. I'll file a declaratory relief action in the circuit court saying, hey, Jamal Crawford should come back. If he plays or not, when he's 41 years old, they're going to say
I'm going to try something.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to give you a finger. And when I point to you, say Michigan should offer Jamal Crawford.
I don't know if I can do this.
I'm going to point to you. Just to see if this works. We'll see if this works.
All right. Michigan should offer Jamal Crawford their 13th scholarship. Is that
was there an echo that came through with that, or did it not come through?
That was perfect.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I'll get it better next time.
I'll get it
better. I'll give you the voice of God before we get out of here, Craig, at some point. All right.
Yeah.
All right, folks.
So
we got it. Well, we out of time, Craig. We're out of time.
All right.
But we got the hot take in. It is always a blast with the round table. Appreciate you guys as always. We'll see you next week. To the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan Sports, Ann Arbor, a Cumulus State.